It was exactly 1:34 in the northern region of Burkina Faso, 15 kilometers outside the city of Traoré, inside Captain Ibrahim Traoré's special command vehicle. What they saw on the infrared night vision system screen confirmed all intelligence reports. Before them, the true face of the complex, officially registered as an agricultural consulting center, was being revealed. High security walls, strategically positioned watchtowers, and most importantly, military vehicles clearly visible even in the darkness of night. This was not an innocent agricultural center. This was the People's Republic of China's most secret military base in West Africa. The intelligence file in Traoré's hands was the result of 3 months of secret investigation. What was written in the file was sounding alarm bells, not only for Burkina Faso, but for the entire African continent. This complex, operating under the name Agricultural Consulting Center, actually housed 300 Chinese military experts, advanced electronic warfare systems, and a shocking amount of weapons. Even more concerning was the fact that this base was not only coordinating activities in Burkina Faso, but also managing similar operations in neighboring countries. That night, the decision Traoré made would be historic. The 2,500 Burkinab soldiers around him were preparing to confront foreign military forces operating without permission on their country's soil. But this wasn't just a military operation. This was the beginning of a diplomatic and military crisis where a small African country faced off against a world superpower. The next 8 hours would be the hours when not only Burkina Faso's but Africa's future independence would be tested. The latest intelligence reports from inside the complex showed how critical the situation was. Chinese commanders had noticed the approaching Burkinab soldiers and activated emergency protocols. All personnel inside the base had gone on alert. Most importantly, direct contact had been established with Beijing, and urgent instructions were awaited from the Chinese State Council. This was no longer just a local tension. This was turning into a crisis that would shake the foundations of China's Africa strategy. When Traoré looked at the complex from his command vehicle window, the size of the structure before him surprised him. The complex that appeared small in satellite images actually covered a massive area of 50 acres. Around the main building were military barracks, weapons depots, and communication antennas secretly constructed. This facility demonstrated how advanced China's military infrastructure in Africa was. The planning of the operation had taken 3 weeks. Traoré and his closest commanders had calculated down to the finest detail how they would manage this delicate situation. The aim was to reveal the true extent of Chinese military presence and seek solutions within the framework of international law without engaging in armed conflict. But everyone knew that the slightest wrong move could lead to an international crisis. Just before midnight, Burkinabe forces took positions around the complex. The operation was planned in 3 phases. In the first phase, the complex would be surrounded and entry and exit would be prevented. In the second phase, communication would be established with the complex commander to seek a diplomatic solution to the situation. In the third phase, if necessary, the complex would be entered and real activities would be documented. At 0015, the first phase of the operation began. Burkinabe soldiers, under the protection of night darkness, took control of every exit of the complex. This professionally coordinated movement took only a few minutes. The Chinese security guards at the main gate of the complex couldn't hide their astonishment when they suddenly found themselves surrounded by Burkinabe soldiers. At this moment, panic began inside the complex. When Chinese commanders understood the seriousness of the situation, their first reflex was to inform Beijing. But communication systems had been disrupted by Burkinab electronic warfare specialists. This technical intervention had not deliberately created a complete communication blackout, but it only made contact with the outside world difficult. The Chinese could still communicate, but every message was being monitored. The complex commander Traore was experiencing one of the most difficult moments of his career. Despite 30 years of military experience, he had never encountered such a situation. He faced the challenge of managing the situation without causing an international diplomatic crisis. The Chinese government placed great importance on keeping its military presence in Africa secret, and exposure of this operation could severely damage China's global strategy. At 1:30 a.m., Traore came to the main gate of the complex. Facing the Chinese security guards, the Burkina Faso leader spoke in a calm but determined manner. "I am Captain Ibrahim Traoré, speaking as the legitimate leader of Burkina Faso. I want to obtain information about the activities being conducted in this complex. This is the exercise of our sovereignty right that applies to everything happening on Burkina Faso soil." The response from the Chinese security guards was diplomatic but vague. "Dear Captain, only agricultural consulting activities are being conducted here. The People's Republic of China is acting within the framework of agreements signed with Burkina Faso." This answer did not satisfy Traore, because the intelligence reports in his hands showed that the activities conducted in the complex had nothing to do with agriculture. Meanwhile, bells began ringing in Beijing. An emergency meeting was called at the Chinese Foreign Ministry. The developments in Burkina Faso had touched the most sensitive point of China's Africa strategy. China was trying to keep its military presence in Africa as secret as possible, officially claiming to only engage in peaceful development cooperation. But Traore's move had shaken the foundations of this strategy. Inside the complex, Chinese soldiers and experts didn't know what to do, waiting for instructions from their commanders. While some began destroying secret documents, others tried to hide military equipment. But everyone knew that hiding military activities of this scale in a complex was nearly impossible. At 2:45 a.m., the first official meeting between complex commander Guernelli and Shaw took place. This meeting would be recorded as one of the most tense diplomatic moments between a small, clumsy country leader and a Chinese military commander in history. While we preferred to speak in Chinese, communication was conducted through an interpreter. Colonel Wei said, "Traoré, I want to know the true nature of the activities conducted in this complex. I don't believe that agricultural consulting requires such heavy security measures." Wei's response was prepared but not convincing. "Dear Captain, modern agricultural technologies are valuable assets and need to be protected. Also, we take necessary measures for the safety of our personnel." This diplomatic war of words was not yielding satisfactory results for either side. While Traoré stated he wanted to see inside the complex, we refused, citing security reasons. When the meeting began to reach an impasse, Traoré made an unexpected move. He put photographs he took from his pocket on the table. The photographs were secret images taken from inside the complex. Military vehicles, weapons depot, electronic warfare equipment. Everything was clearly visible. Bey's facial expression completely changed when he saw the photographs. While trying to understand how these photographs were taken, he also grasped how serious the situation had become. "How were these photographs taken?" asked Wei, with both surprise and concern in his voice. Traoré's answer was brief but effective. "Colonel, this is my country. I have the right to know what's happening on my own soil." This sentence completely changed the tone of the meeting. We now understood that he could no longer deny. At 4 a.m., the first instruction from Beijing reached the complex. The Chinese government wanted the situation resolved through diplomatic channels, demanding that every measure be taken to prevent military tension from escalating. But at the same time, the security of strategic equipment in the complex also needed to be ensured. In line with thus instructions, we developed a new strategy. He offered Traoré a partial tour. He would try to prove that the activities were really agricultural by showing certain sections of the complex. But Traoré approached this offer with suspicion, quick as the intelligence reports in his hands showed where the most sensitive sections of the complex were located. At 5:30 in the morning, the limited tour began. Traore entered the complex with his security team. The first areas shown were indeed agricultural laboratories and testing areas. But Traoré's experienced eyes noticed that these areas could also be used for military purposes. Especially the soil analysis laboratories could also be used for explosive material analysis. The most critical moment of the tour was seeing the electronic laboratories. We tried to present the laboratories as agricultural data analysis centers, but Traoré's technical advisors noticed that most of this equipment consisted of communication and electronic warfare systems, especially the satellite communication. Antennas and signal processing equipment had capabilities far beyond agricultural purposes. At 7:15, an unexpected incident occurred during the tour. A Chinese soldier coming from the restricted area of the complex was surprised to see the Burkina delegation and reflexively hid the secret documents in his hands. This moment was captured on security cameras that recorded everything. The expression on Wei's face showed that the situation was getting out of control. After this incident, Traoré decided to end the tour Wei. He said, "What I've seen doesn't satisfy me. It's clear that military activities are being conducted in this complex. What I now request from you is to work in complete transparency with the Burkina Faso government." V's response was a diplomatic evasion. "Dear Captain, we can discuss these matters between our governments." At 8:30 in the morning, the final phase of the 8-hour tension began. Traore requested that the Chinese personnel in the complex clarify their activities within 48 hours otherwise. He stated that the Burkina Faso government could make unilateral decisions. This ultimatum took the crisis to a new dimension. We requested time to have urgent consultations with Beijing. Meanwhile, Burkinabe soldiers around the complex maintained their positions throughout the 8 hours of tension. No shots had been fired, but tension was at its peak. Both sides knew that the slightest wrong move could lead to an international crisis. Finally, at 8:45, we presented his final offer to Traoré with instructions received from Beijing. "Dear Captain, my government accepts that the activities in this complex will be transparently shared with the Burkina Faso government. From now on, all operations will be conducted in mutual agreement." This offer meant a partial victory for Traoré, even if he couldn't achieve the complete transparency he wanted. He had succeeded in bringing China to the table. "Colonel Wei," he said, "this is sufficient for a start, but from now on, no activity will be conducted secretly on Burkina Faso soil." The 8-hour siege thus ended with a diplomatic agreement. No blood had been shed, but the message was clear. Africa's new generation of leaders were determined to have control over their own territories. Traoré's move resonated, not only in Burkina Faso, but throughout Africa. After this event, China's military presence in Africa took an important place on the international agenda. The African Union decided to investigate the situation of similar complexes in other countries. China, on the other hand, was forced to be more transparent in its Africa policy. Traoré's bold move became an example of how small countries could struggle against great powers. The combination of diplomatic skill, strategic planning, and determined leadership could bring success even in seemingly impossible situations. After the operation, the true dimensions of the complex were revealed. China was indeed operating a regional military coordination center under the mask of agricultural consulting. This discovery led to questioning of other similar facilities in Africa. International media characterized Traoré's operation as Little David's challenge to Goliath. The 8 hours of tension had shown the world Africa's changing face and the bold approach of new generation leaders. This story became a symbol of modern Africa's independence struggle. Traoré had won a great victory without using weapons, only with determination and diplomacy. Africa's future was in the hands of such brave leaders. In the days following the operation, reactions from the international community worried. While the United States announced its support for Traoré's demand for transparency, the European Union displayed a more cautious approach. France, despite being uncomfortable with its traditional ally Burkina Faso's bold move, refrained from open criticism. The most interesting reaction came from neighboring African countries. The governments of Mali, Niger, and Ghana decided to examine similar facilities on their own soil. The true dimensions of the network of agricultural centers that China had established throughout Africa began to be questioned. The president of Ghana ordered an urgent audit of 3 Chinese facilities in the country. Traoré's operation also came up in African Union meetings. At the emergency summit held in Ethiopia, African leaders published the Sovereignty and Transparency Declaration. This declaration emphasized that all foreign military activities on African soil should be within the knowledge of host countries. China's reaction was not as harsh as expected. Beijing preferred to manage the situation through diplomatic channels, although the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson stated that all of China's activities in Africa serve peaceful development purposes. They were now forced to provide transparency. To support these claims, the biggest result of the operation was the confidence gained by Africa's young leaders. The courage shown by Traoré inspired other leaders on the continent. From Senegal to Uganda, young African leaders began to more closely examine foreign presence in their own countries. Economically, the incident did not affect China-Africa trade relations. China was forced to adopt a more transparent approach to protect its economic interests in Africa. This situation meant more advantageous agreements for African countries in the long run. From a military analysis perspective, the operation added a new dimension to modern warfare doctrine. It was proven that strategic objectives could be achieved without conventional use of force, only through siege and diplomatic pressure. This tactic began to be studied in military armies worldwide. Traoré's personal prestige also peaked with this operation. Time magazine included him among the Person of the Year candidates. Forbes included him in the 50 Leaders Changing the World list. BBC listed the operation among the most successful diplomatic moves of the 21st century. As the details of the operation emerged later, it became clear how much Traoré had planned in advance. 3 months of intelligence work had produced not only the complex's activities but also psychological profiles of Chinese commanders. This preparation was the key to the operation's success. Finally, this event strengthened Africa's position in world politics. African leaders now believed they could negotiate with great powers on equal terms. Traoré's bold move had been the beginning of the continent's new era. Developments 6 months after the operation once again revealed Traoré's strategic intelligence. China signed a new cooperation agreement with Burkina Faso, and this agreement stipulated that all activities would be transparent and supervised by joint committees. This was the first full transparency agreement China had signed in Africa. Even more impressive was the transformation process of the complex. China removed secret military equipment and converted the facility into a real agricultural research center. Burkinabe and Chinese experts now work together, and all data obtained was shared by scientists from both countries. This transformation was characterized in international media as the triumph of diplomacy. Traoré's operation also created a new security paradigm in Africa. The new African Security Network, called AFRIC, began monitoring all foreign military activities on the continent. This network established an early warning system that would prevent similar surprises by combining the intelligence services of 20 African countries. The psychological impact of the operation was also enormous. The people of Burkina Faso proudly welcomed their leader's brave stance in celebration marches organized throughout the country. Slogans of sovereignty and independence were chanted. Young Burkinabes felt that their country no longer lived in the shadow of great powers. The operation also set a precedent from an international law perspective. The United Nations Security Council prepared a new resolution draft titled Host Country Rights. This draft strengthened COUNT's right to oversee all foreign activities on their territories. The change in China's Africa strategy was also noteworthy. Beijing began implementing transparency protocols in all facilities it established in Africa under the new Silk Road project. This change affected Chinese projects in 15 different countries from Ethiopia to Kenya, not just in Burkina Faso. The technical details of the operation also aroused admiration. The ability of Burkinabe intelligence services to gather such detailed information in just 3 months was an indicator of Africa's technological capacity. The drone imaging, electronic surveillance, and secret photography techniques used in the operation proved that Africa now had a say in this field. Traoré's composure during the operation was also a subject of analysis. His never showing tension for 8 hours. Always using diplomatic language, seeking solutions without cornering the other side, began to be taught as an exemplary case in modern leadership lessons. This operation ultimately redefined how small countries could struggle against great powers. It showed how great victories could be won without using force, only through a combination of preparation, determination, and diplomatic skills. Traoré's story would continue to inspire the next generation of African leaders.